Yes, I'll be looking at porn, recording.
I will try my best not to.
Yeah, you can actually like zoom in on the camera to see it stuff.
I'm not doing it.
Hardcore, okay. You go ahead.
Wow.
Okay, so we're gonna be in chapter 14 of embalming. It's on cavity embalming. Okay. It'd probably be good if I had my lecture notes. 1 moment.
You need 15 minutes.
There's one right there, I don't know. 277.
Let me get some paper.
Oh, Doc Martens.
I think you.
Oh,
They're making a huge comeback.
I think they are. I've been seeing advertised.
oh, it's secret.
One piece of paper.
Today's a great day.
And you spoke from.
This is. Don't run this Elizabeth and Adonis and Harrison.
No. Oh.
Okay, so if you'll remember, in people history, maybe, treatment of the viscera has been employed since the ancient Egyptians. They had all these special practices that we still don't exactly know how they did it and how they were able to preserve a body as in mummification as well as they did. But you'll remember the canopic jars where they would remove the organs of the body, and each canopic jar had a specific organ to it. And so treatment of the cavity has been employed for a very long time. But the trocar that we use wasn't invented until the end of the 19th century. And that's why they used to call funeral directors belly pushers. That's when the trocar came out. So you know the purposes of cavity embalming. It treats the content of the hollow viscera that the arterial solution is not going to reach during the process of embalming. It'll treat the walls of the visceral organs, and it prevents odors and gas formation. You know that if you don't treat the cavity, that you have a chance of them swelling up and having gases that can actually purge out. So it prevents odors, it prevents gas, and it prevents purge from coming out of an external body orifice. Cavity embalming is not a visible procedure because we can't, unless we actually slice the abdomen open, you actually don't see with your eyes how it's treated. And if you'll remember from embalming chemicals, cavity fluid is not diluted. You just put the actual body of cavity fluid into the cavity. It's not, there's no dyes, just extremely strong. And so we actually don't see with the naked eye how it operates inside the cavity, but we know that it preserves because we know that it helps prevent the purge and gas formation. Because what happens if you have a body with a lot of gas pressure, you can actually insert the trocar and let it come out. So we know that it's absolutely significant, for lack of a better word, to do this. Two-step process. First, you aspirate the cavities and their contents, and then you follow it with an injection of a strong preservative. It takes place after arterial embalming, And the suggested order, depending on how your preceptor teaches, you, just out of habit, this is the way I did it. You go in 2 inches up, and then you go to the thoracic cavity and its contents, going towards that right ear, and hit the heart, and get that blood. Because we want to remove as much blood as possible, otherwise there could be color changes. As the blood settles, as it mixes with formaldehyde, it can turn the body gray. So we want to make sure we get as much as possible out. So thoracic cavity and its contents, abdominal cavity and its contents, and then pelvic cavity and its contents. So you literally go up, 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 and then side and down. Does anybody do that, or does anybody just kind of have a habit do something else?
I'm pretty sure.
That's pretty standard.
That's not how
How you doing?
Really? How do you do it?
well, I mean, just backwards from that.
You go down first?
No, we go down flat, actually. You want to know the truth?
Mhm.
I was never told to go down at all. So with this right down there, I never got aspirated at all.
Great.
And I went from just the opposite. I went from like, instead of going from the right to the left, I went from the left to the right.
Oh, you
just
can
saying.
get tied up in the colon.
And you
If you
do,
do that.
and then you get it all stopped up. And I just kept cleaning. I didn't know. They told me, and I didn't know until recently. And Jack was the one that told me to do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That whole time. That would have been more difficult.
it was extremely difficult.
Good morning. We're doing embalming in chapter 14 and cavity embalming.
Didn't,
Okay. Yeah, the reason you go in from the right side is because your colon starts, the cecum's on the right side. Sorry, I'm doing it backwards. So the cecum's on the right side, it goes up, across, and down. But if you go in right here, you'll bypass the transverse and the descending colon. But if you go in from the right side, it'll get tangled up in the liver, it'll get tangled up in the large intestine. So that's why it's important to go from the right side. So do y'all remember the body cavities? Your dorsal cavity, your cranial cavity, thoracic, abdominal, pelvic, and then each individual organ inside of the body has its own cavity, its own membrane covering it. So let's see where I'm at. So the solid organs treated by cavity embalming, you don't really see it. You don't even know if you hit it. We just do this. We just assume. So if you would treat the pancreas, the spleen, kidneys, liver, and lungs. Also, you want to make sure you get the bladder. Make sure that you get in. You make sure you hit the cecum because it's going to get that solid fecal matter out, compacted fecal matter. So cranial treatment, we don't normally do that unless it's infant, because with an infant, you want to make sure to take special care of the head, because the head, as you know, it's got fun cells, it's got soft tissue, and you don't want any breakdown.
What would you do?
I've never actually treated a cranial. Let me pull the book, because I think it has process. Does anybody have an embalming?
I have right here. You know what chapter?
14. I think it has the procedure. I just don't want to go the wrong direction in certain ways. If I had to guess, you would have hypodermic with that.
Oh, right there.
Oh, okay. So page 289, it looks like you take an infant trocar. Yeah, an infant trocar, a large hypodermic needle inserted through the nostril, through the sinus cavity, all the way up to the cranial cavity. If y'all want to know that, it's page 289. I haven't treated the cranial cavity. The only infant I ever did was born without the actual frontal parietal, like the parietal bones. She didn't have any. Sorry, we didn't have any of the brain exposed, so I actually treated the brain like surface with compress. So I haven't actually injected anything into the brain before. Has anybody had to treat a baby yet?
have, but not like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
that would be hard. And I'm not gonna say every embalmer would do that, because that is like, it's like kind of personal too, like.
it just seems basic. It seems very basic, even for embalming.
Oh,
Doesn't even. Right.
So that's the hardest part, something is taking care of it. Or like a small child, so there's something you have to pick them up, put them in the casket. You're not gonna use a lift for them. Break them. But back to cavity treatment. Cranial treatment is for preparing stillborn or infant, and then the contents coming out of these hollow viscera is going to be blood, edema, purulent materials, pus from an infection if it's internal, gases, body fluids, stomach acid, and urine. So you want to make sure you try to hit everything. So purge, purge from the stomach is like coffee grounds, or it looks like tobacco to me. Yeah, it does. It's got coffee grounds. It usually comes out of the nose and mouth. It's real gross. It smells bad. It's too foul. As soon as somebody's purging, I would actually, after I embalmed, let them sit overnight, let gravity do the work for you, and then aspirate the next morning. But a lot of funeral homes aspirate immediately. So it's just however you call it. The lungs, if it's kind of pink or frothy, little odor. If it's frothy, it's coming from the lung. You can use a trocar to pull that fluid from the lung. Many of y'all saw COVID cases. A lot of them have a ton of fluid because when you have COVID, I think you mentioned you want to lay down because you're so tired. That actually causes pneumonia because everything's settling in your lungs. You kind of walk and break that. So a lot of COVID cases are going to have a lot of fluid in the lung. Cranial or purge from the brain is very rare. You're not going to see it often at all. It'll come from the nose, the ears, or from the eyes, like lacrimal dots, something around that. It's going to be white. It's very dangerous because that is like the fluid that's in your spine and your brain. If they have any infection whatsoever, it can be transmitted via that body fluid. So be very careful if you ever see it. It's creamy white. It's semi-solid. It's not as runny as stomach or lung purge. It can be caused from fractures. Say they were in a car accident and they had a cranial fracture. It can cause purge that way. Let me see.
It really looks kind of like snot in a way.
Yeah, like it would be that consistency. I've never seen it. The cranial purge. Have you seen it?
And it was a wreck.
accident?
Correct.
But that's because racks, even if the body on the outside looks normal, it can be wrecked internally from like the pressure of like impact when they do something. Gases, if they're purged in the brain, gases can actually get into the tissue of the eye. So you'll have to watch for that. And then purge from the anal orifice, fecal matter, rectal hemorrhages can be a source of body purge. So that's when we use the AV plug. I am an idiot and I just realized that AV plug stands for anal/vaginal. I was like, why is it called that?
I didn't know.
So sorry about that. That's what AV stands for, is anal vaginal
I always
plug.
thought it was audio visual.
You
You don't want to hear it, you don't want to see it.
True. Okay, you know your instruments. Do you want me to grab them or do you
No, we
feel comfortable? With embalming, it's basically me repeating what you've already learned, but in book format. Okay, so instruments. You've got the trocar of different sizes. You've got the tubing that goes from the trocar to the hydroaspirator that creates a suction of water, or an electric aspirator. You have the cavity injector. That's when you pull the cavity fluid and then the gravity, it goes to the cavity. You need a needle and ligature to do a first suture or a trocar button and trocar button applicator. You need a disinfection tray for cleaning. Has anyone ever seen a disinfection tray at their funeral home?
It's nasty.
You need a nasal, if you want to do, like if they're having really bad throat, you can actually use a nasal aspirator to stick in the back of their throat and it helps pull a lot of it out. And if you're doing an autopsy aspirator, because you want to constantly be removing fluids from the cavities because everything can fill the cavity during a point injection.
I know someone that leaves all that.
You leave it there.
Somebody does.
I mean, if it technically cauterized body walls and prevent it from, it's not going to hurt it. It's more for your protection for multiple fumes from the formaldehyde.
And that leave wide open. I don't think you're ready to
Interesting.
grab.
I mean, it makes sense. That's not wrong. It makes sense. Every single business is going to kind of differ because we're more of like customs and how embalmers, they didn't have to go to school, they were just trained apprentices. So everybody has a different way of doing things. Okay, let's talk about visceral anatomy. We're going to go back to anatomy for a little bit because the embalmer should constantly be aware of the internal structures. You should know what you're trying to preserve and you should know what's in the body. So, say you're treating the cranium. Not that you're going to go and look for every lobe, but it's just important to know these structures. So with the brain, you've got the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe, and then the cerebellum is the little, it's separate. Let me show y'all. Little brain. It's a separate structure. I'll come up here. Cerebellum, this is a cerebral hemisphere. This is a brain cut in half. You're going to have the diencephalon. This is the corpus callosum, which is what holds the hemispheres together. The diencephalon, you've got the brainstem, the cerebellum. Look at it. Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
So the cerebellum actually protects the brainstem.
Well,
I got it.
Okay.
It's just in my mind.
gotcha. Then we have the thoracic cavity. So we did cranial cavity, thoracic cavity. You've got lungs and heart. That's what you're worried about. Don't worry about anything else. You want to get the blood from the heart and you want to get any like pulmonary edema out of those lungs. Okay. The abdomen. This is where you kind of want to hit everything. Okay, so you can picture this. If you can picture the digestive system, you've seen pictures of it several times. So let's say, where's the belly button? Here's my liver, here's my stomach. Yeah, you're kind of going to go in like in the middle of the small intestine.
I do like that one. I got a question. What if you know it's that's almost a function of the lower intestines, and that's a lot of like soft feces, and it gets jammed up, the trocar, and it's just like you can't stop it because it's so like I've almost poured water just to try to get it to.
I know, because if it gets stuck in a tube, it's so hard to get back.
And like I poured water in my body to try and like no, because I didn't. It's not really this.
Yeah, it's experimenting.
Yeah, for real. I didn't play what very well, but like, what do you do when there's like constant feces coming in the area and punctured it?
You know what? If you can, I would just, it's plugging it up so much, go to a different location, get everything else, and just make sure you get that with cavity fluid. That's what I would do, because I mean, you can't guarantee anything's gonna come out. So I would just hit it with fluid. Do your best. Absolutely.
Like keep your hose. south of it. Once you heat and sun goes in, out, trocar in a single, is at the water run.
That's what I did. I put it in the
Before
toilet.
it- you know, before it stops up.
I would do that.
What's
too.
a good thing too, when you put it out, just mouth and the end of it blow. That's what I do.
Stop that.
Stop.
Take it out, let it breathe.
And I don't know, because
Right.
there's so much
Yeah, just
pressure.
let it breathe. When you don't hear it,
Gotta airhead it.
when you don't hear it,
No,
suck it.
it's like clay. Water doesn't get out.
Yeah, I've had it stuck before and I would like bang it on the toilet. I know it's gross. And then I'd cut it off and the pressure from the hydroaspirate shoot it into the toilet. You could try that too. Then again, I had a redneck of a mechanic who had no professional training. Maybe that was just my system. I allowed it to do that.
Maybe so.
A redneck that's on a golf trip with my boss while they're busy.
Ooh.
Okay, so we've got the abdomen, you've got the liver, the stomach, pancreas. You definitely want to hit the cecum. That's really first priority. But first you go, okay, so you go in right here, you hit the thoracic cavity, you hit this, and then you want to make sure you hit that cecum. If you are having trouble with the fecal matter or compact matter, go to a different location. Try it again. If you're having trouble, just make sure the cavity fluid is in there.
Sometimes we do, I'm sorry to keep talking, but sometimes what we do is, when we can't get all the fluid out, we'll go ahead and put the cavity fluid in there, and then let that set right. And
Yes.
then re-aspirate the next day. Because that helps. break some of
Absolutely.
that stuff apart, yeah.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's necessary to aspirate again, re-aspirate, and put more cavity fluid in. Okay, this is the pelvic cavity. As you know, women and men have different organs in their pelvic cavities. Okay, so this is just to give you a visual. You have your urinary bladder, and then the male's urinary bladder. Don't ever, if you have hydrocele, don't ever try to puncture the testicles, because I'm here to tell you it won't work. Just learn from that mistake. My boss was like, and I was like, don't try to aspirate that. Just like treat it surfacely, treat it on the surface, and then, cavity
There's a
involved.
section in here about treating hydrocele. Have you
Hydrocele,
seen
is it in the?
Yeah, it's in the
14?
book, yeah, it is.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna touch on that.
Okay.
Tell me what page it is when you get to it.
It's on page 288, treatment of the male genital.
288, treatment. How did I miss that? Okay, I'll come back to that.
Man wrote this.
Y'all remember your 9-region plan? It's so important. You must know this, absolutely. And you can remember it because the iliacs are right beside where your common iliacs are. Hypo means below, like if you're gonna use a hypo valve trocar, right? Or when you hypo somebody, you're going below the skin. Makes sense? Umbilical cord, know that. Lumbar, lower back, you know that. Epi means above or around. Then hypochondrium. You're just gonna have to learn that. I said last week, I forgot what I said, but I was like, oh, hydrophobia. Like, wait, never mind. No, hypochondria.
Not rabies.
Not rabies. Yes, correct. Okay. Trocar guides. So the guide for the right side of the heart is to direct the trocar to the right earlobe. After the trocar passes through the diaphragm, which is right here, so you'll feel it. You'll feel it go through. After it goes through the diaphragm, which is that parachute-shaped organ, you depress the point and you'll enter the right of the heart. Okay? Guide for the stomach. You direct the trocar point towards the intersection of fifth intercostal, so your rib, direct towards the rib, and the left mid axillary line. So you're aiming it to the rib and armpit, pretty much, for the stomach. Okay? Is this picture backwards? No. Okay. So you go up, you do the heart, and then you go over here to the stomach. Because remember, everything's kind of a little bit to the left. You'll hit the stomach, aim for the fifth rib space and the armpit line. I would just aim for the armpit. Simple enough. For the left armpit, and you'll hit the stomach. The guide for the cecum is to direct it towards the right hip and the right pubic symphysis. Keep the point of the trocar up near the abdominal wall so it doesn't get tangled in anything that's underlying, and then dip it forward and it will go into the colon and cecum. The guide for the urinary bladder, literally just point it center down. You'll hit the urinary bladder, and you'll know because tubing, you can see what you're pulling through. So, towards the median line of the pubic bone, retract, depress, insert into the bladder. Does that make sense? Okay. Time period for cavity treatment. Some people do it immediately after, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people wait several hours. Nothing wrong with that. Some people wait till the next day. Some people wait a day or two. So it's all just personal preference. Re-aspiration, re-injection may be necessary, and then there's technique for all of this from page 286 to 289. Okay, I'm gonna read that about the male genitalia. I think that's really important because I've seen hydrocele several times, like pretty often. Okay, so but this is your study guide for chapter 14. Just know the body cavities and organs in those cavities. You should already know that, so no pressure. Know the 9 regions of the abdomen. Understand the underlying structures while you're cavity embalming, and then describe the major trocar guides. So you've got the right earlobe, to the left armpit for the stomach, to the right hip for the cecum, and straight down for the urinary bladder. Now, I know those aren't scientific terms. That's the easiest way to remember it. Okay. How short these chapters are. This is going to be a really smooth sailing semester because I'm not going to overwhelm you with a ton of stuff and you don't know how to take the board in 4 months. So it's going to be very low key. I'm going to, y'all want me to do like a mini on the male genitalia, or y'all want to read it real quick?
Whatever you do.
But is that
No, so that we
Have you ever? Have you ever stood in front of the seas with the
Oh,
heart?
I'm sorry.
no?
Have you heard keep the heart incision?
No, I haven't.
One of our guys does that all the time.
I mean, it would work.
He just does it basically to try to dry it, or you know,
Yeah.
you've been draining it like that.
Mhm. I would just be afraid to like tear tissue. That would be the only thing. But man, I know what they're doing. Okay, I'm gonna look at this real quick. 289. Okay, treatment of the male genitalia. So after you aspirate the pelvic cavity and the abdominal cavity, do not insert the trocar into the scrotum to aspirate this organ. Missy did not read this, and she is. Okay. Do not insert it into the scrotum. You should, however, inject cavity fluid into the shaft of the penis. Oh, I've never done that. Okay, but that's what the book says. Is if they have hydrocele, you insert it, I guess through a hypodermic, going through the shaft of the penis, like through the hole.
Good God.
You gonna do that, Jack?
No. I got a quick comment.
2 days later.
Mhm.
Great. I'll use words.
What did you say I was talking?
Deflated.
What did you do? What's deflated? How did you deflate it? You put gravity fluid in it? Through the penis?
No.
What did you do?
You just dragged it into the skirt.
Really? I think I would rather do that.
Yeah, you can also treat it from going in like you're gonna the urinary bladder and then go. That makes
Is that what
sense.
the book, what's the
But
book
be
say?
careful because also you could come out the other end.
That's right.
Actually, I've done that before.
The
It was an accident. If you're in a bomber, you know that things will happen sometimes that are out of control. I mean, they're not out of control, but accidents.
So you just don't really aspirate, what you're doing is you just stick it in there, sticking the cavity fluid in there.
Yep. So basically, cavity fluid will fix anything.
Okay, here's my question. They say that sometimes in cases, right, that says that sometimes embalming versus increases, versus the,
It'll completely reverse it.
well, if hydrocele is extreme edema scrotum, why would you treat it more if it could possibly be worse?
The point of that would be like using super hypertonic solution. So if you were to use a hypertonic with like, put too much fluid, like it with straight cavity fluid is going to cool all of that moisture.
What if you have a low index cavity? That's all that we have in our facility.
But it's not diluted with
Right.
co-injections, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when you arterial embalm somebody, you can use a low index, but you're still filling it with 3/4 of a gallon of water.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
all right,
That makes sense?
yes.
Yes. So it very well could reverse if there was so much. Now, if it was just localized in one area, I don't think you would have that problem. I'm not saying it's impossible because everybody's different. But that's more generalized all over the body. There's so much fluid that it's just going to continue to dilute it, and then nothing will be involved.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Did I make it to an hour?
Almost.
Almost? Okay. I'm gonna cut off the recording and then can do some conference review, whatever steps y'all wanna do, y'all can do that.
Let's study this body cavities and contents, because I don't know,
Body cavities and contents.
you just did basically.
Do you want me to go back to them or pull something up?
I'm just gonna read it.
Does anybody have any questions on cavity embalming? I know y'all do it every day that you are in school, so. Okay, everybody say bye, camera.